A very good afternoon to all. Today we are going to discuss excretory product and their elimination. As you all know that excretion is the elimination of the metabolic waste like ammonia, urea and uric acid from the body. And the mechanism of the removal of these nitrogenous waste is known as excretion. On the basis of which organism will excrete which nitrogenous waste, on the basis of that, organisms are classified as ammonotelic, ureotelic, and uricotelic. In case of ammonotelic, the excretory matter is ammonia. It is require a large quantity of water because ammonia is soluble. So it requires a large quantity of water. As it requires a large quantity of water, so this ammonia will be excreted out in organisms which are aquatic in nature, like aquatic insect, aquatic amphibians, like tadpole. And ammonia is highly toxic in nature, so it cannot be stored in the body. Second is the ureotelic. Urea, the excretory product is urea, that is why they are ureotelic. Urea require less water as compared to ammonia, and they're less toxic than ammonia. Mostly mammals, marine fishes, and terrestrial amphibians, they are ureotelic. Now, uricotelic, the excretory waste is uric acid. It requires least amount of water, very least, and they are least toxic. These are found in birds, insects, land snails, and many reptiles. They are uricotelic. There's one more point in mammals. The uric acid, it's formed when you consume a diet that contains a high amount of purine, like adenine and guanine. If you're consuming a diet which contains a high amount of purine, then purine will be broken down into xanthin. Xanthin will be broken down into uric acid crystals by the enzyme which is known as xanthin oxidase. Now, these uric acid crystals, they get accumulated in the joint and lead to gout, or we also called as gouty arthritis. Remember this, so important. Moving next is the type of excretory organ and their example. For example, like protonephridia, or we also call it as flame cells. These are found in organisms like platyhelminthes, flatworms, planaria, rotifers, some annelids, and cephalochordates like amphioxus. Next is nephridia, found in annelids like earthworm, Malpighian tubules found in cockroach, Greenland or antennal gland, these are found in crustacean prawns, and kidney, these are found in vertebrates. Please remember the examples and the excretory organs. Moving next is the human excretory system. Human excretory system, it consists of 2 kidney, 2 ureter, one urinary bladder, and 1 urethra. So you can see this kidney. On the top of the kidney, there's adrenal glands are present. And the kidney is present in pair, that is 2 kidneys. So adrenal glands are also present in pair. Always remember that the right kidney is lower than the left kidney because on the top, the liver is present. Here, liver present. And there are 2 ureters, 1 urinary bladder, and 1 urethra. The kidney, they have 2 surfaces. One is inner and the other is outer. Inner is concave in nature and outer is convex in nature. And on the inner surface, there's a hilum is present. Hilum is a notch or a depression which is present on the inner concave surface of the kidney. And hilum is also known as the root of kidney. Why? Because it is the because here the exit and the entry point takes place. Exit of the renal vein and ureters, and entry of the nerve and the renal artery. So renal artery and nerve, they will enter the kidney, and the renal vein or the ureter, they leave the kidney. And inner to the hilum, this funnel shape. There's a funnel space is present, which is known as pelvis. And pelvis is associated with the major or minor calyces. Position of the kidney. Position of the kidney, that kidney is present between the last thorax and the third lumbar. Length of the kidney is 10 to 12 centimeter, width is 5 to 7 centimeter, and thickness is 2 to 3 centimeter. Weight of the kidney is 120 to 170 gram. Now the kidney, they have two zones. There's a cortex zone and there's medulla zone. Medulla is divided into a conical masses which are known as the medullary pyramids. And these medullary pyramids, they are associated with the minor calyces. These are the calyces. And these calyces are further associated with the pelvis. And this cortex, or the venal cortex, they extended into the space between the medullary pyramid and they form the column of vertebrae. They form the column of vertebrae. And the functional and the functional unit of kidney is nephron. Please remember this. The functional unit of kidney is nephron, and nephron is consists of two parts. One is glomerulus, and the second is the renal tubule. Glomerulus is the tuft of blood capillaries. And these capillaries, they are formed by the afferent arteriole. Remember this. These tuft of blood capillaries, they are formed by the afferent arteriole. And these glomerulus, they are enclosed in a Bowman capsule. Okay, so renal tubule is consist of Bowman capsule, PCT, DCT, and loop of Henle. These are the part of the renal tubule. You can see that there's a tuft. This is the tuft of blood capillaries. This is known as glomerulus. And these tuft of blood capillaries are formed by the afferent arteriole. And this glomerulus is enclosed by the Bowman capsule. Bowman capsule, it has two layers. It is a double layer structure. Remember this. It has two layers. There's an outer layer and the inner layer. And both the layers, they are made up of simple squamous epithelium. Remember this. Both the layer, the outer layer and the inner layer of Bowman capsule, they are made up of simple squamous epithelium. I'm drawing the structure of Bowman capsule. This is the outer and this is the inner. The inner layer, it consists of finger-like projections, cells which are known as podocyte. And between the podocyte, the slit are present, which are known as the filtration slit. Remember this. If a question asks you where this filtration slits are present, please remember these filtration slit and the podocytes are present in the inner membrane of Bowman capsule. Okay, and the second part of the nephron is the renal tubule, which consists of PCT, which is a proximal convoluted tubule where the maximum reabsorption takes place, or the essential reabsorption takes place. If I say essential, I mean that most of the components are reabsorbed in PCT, like organic molecule like glucose, amino acid, bicarbonate, water, electrolyte. Maximum reabsorption takes place in proximal convoluted tubule. That is why we call PCT as an essential reabsorption, the place where the essential reabsorption takes place. And PCT is lined by the brush border epithelium. Brush border cuboidal epithelium. Remember this, very important. Please remember the lining of each tubule, like PCT, DCT, loop of Henle. Okay, please remember, and the Bowman capsule, please remember their linings. They are very important. So PCT, which is a proximal convoluted tubule, is lined by the brush border cuboidal epithelium. Okay, it is a brush border. That means it a brush is having a small projection, because of which it increases the surface area. So if the surface area increases, maximum absorption will take place. That is why we call that maximum absorption takes place in PCT. Now, second come is the Henle loop. Henle loop is consists of two limbs. There's a descending limb and the ascending limb. Descending limb, which is moving downward, and the ascending limb, which is moving upward. And the descending limb is also consist of two parts. There's a thick and thin. So thick part is lined by the cuboidal epithelium, and the thin part is lined by the squamous epithelium. Remember this. Similarly, in ascending loop, in ascending limb of loop of Henle, it consists of thick and thin part. Thick is lined by the cuboidal epithelium and thin is lined by the squamous epithelium. This Henle loop, they form a hairpin-like structure. Like this, they form a hairpin-like structure. Next from the Henle loop is the DCT, which is a distal convoluted tubule. And distal convoluted tubule is lined by the cuboidal epithelium. And in DCT, the conditional reabsorption takes place. Okay? In DCT, conditional reabsorption takes place. Similarly, in collecting duct also, conditional reabsorption takes place. For example, if you are suffering from diarrhea, then excess of water is lost. Okay? From our body, a large amount of water is lost. So, in this case, the DCT and the collecting duct, they will perform the conditional reabsorption, that is in presence of hormone. Okay, NaCl will be reabsorbed in presence of hormone aldosterone, and the water will be reabsorbed in the presence of ADH, which is vasopressin or antidiuretic hormone. Moving next, you can see these are the podocytes. And between there is a filtration slits are present. This table is very important, beta. Please, I told you that remember the lining of the tubule, like PCT, simple cuboidal brush border epithelium. Loop of Henle, ascending limb, thick, simple cuboidal epithelium. Loop of Henle, ascending limb, thin, squamous cells. Please remember the lining. These are very important. Sometimes you might get a question, match the following. And they will give you the tubules on one side, the renal tubule, parts of the renal tubule, and their epithelial tissue in the second column. And they can ask you which one is the correct option. Moving next, the nephron, there are two types. One is the cortical nephron and the other one is just a medullary nephron. As the name suggests, cortical. So the Marphagian corpuscle, they are lined the cortex of kidney. Marphagian corpuscle, they are the glomerulus plus Bowman capsule. Together, they constitute the Marphagian corpuscle. Remember this. In case of cortical nephron, the Marphagian corpuscle are close to the kidney surface. Close to the kidney surface. That means they are referring to cortex. And they constitute 80 to 85% of the total nephron. In case of cortical nephron, the loop of Henle is mostly confined in the cortex, and they form a very small part of which runs in the medulla. You can see in cortical nephron, the loop of Henle is poorly developed. But in case of juxtamedullary nephron, the loop of Henle, this is the loop of Henle, it is well developed. Okay? And please remember this vasa recta and the peritubular capillaries. So peritubular capillaries are when the efferent atriole. You know that the blood will be, first is the efferent atriole, which carry the blood to the glomerulus capillaries. And then glomerulus capillary, they reunite and they form the efferent atriole, which carry the blood away from the glomerulus, is efferent atriole. So the efferent atriole, when they form a closed network around the PCT and DCT, this closed network is known as a peritubular capillary network. And you can see this in cortical nephron. You can see the blood vessels, they're surrounding the PCT and DCT. So peritubular capillary network is present in cortical nephron, but vasa recta is absent or highly reduced. Vasa recta is a U shape. This is vasa recta, this U shape blood vessels, U-shaped network of blood vessels around this loop of Henle. This is known as vasa recta. Remember this. This is known as vasa recta. If the loop of Henle, I told you in cortical nephron, the loop of Henle is very small part. That means the vasa recta is, it will be highly reduced or it will be completely absent. Okay, because vasa recta present in close proximity with loop of Henle. Now next come is juxtamedullary nephron, which constitute 15 to 20% of the nephron. Marphigian corpuscle, they are present at the junction of the cortex and medulla. Here the loop of Henle is well developed. It is present in the medulla. You can see it in juxtamedullary nephron. The loop of Henle is well developed. So vasa recta is also present. Okay, remember this. It's very important. And peritubular capillary network is not well developed in juxtamedullary nephron. Moving next is the mechanism of urine formation. Very, very important beta. Two most important topic of this chapter is the mechanism of urine formation, and the second is the counter current. These are two most important topic of this chapter. First step of the mechanism of urine formation is the ultrafiltration or glomerular filtration. Second is the selective tubular reabsorption, and third is the tubular secretion. First is glomerular filtration. This is a blood vessel. This is a Bowman capsule. So the component from the blood, first they will pass this layer of blood vessels. This is a glomerular blood capillary. So the component from the blood, first they will pass the endothelium of the blood capillary. Remember this. This is the basement membrane. Now the component which has crossed this endothelium of the blood capillaries, now they will pass this basement membrane. Now the component will again pass the inner layer of the Bowman capsule. This is the inner layer of the Bowman capsule. So the component from the blood, they are crossing three membrane. Number one is the endothelium of the blood capillary. Now they're crossing this basement membrane, and now they're crossing the inner membrane of the Bowman capsule. And finally, the filtrate reaches to the Bowman capsule, and we call this filtrate as glomerular filtrate. Now this glomerular filtrate will enter into the PCT, then DCT, then loop of Henle and DCT, and finally to collecting duct. Remember one important point, that 99% of the filtrate has to be reabsorbed by the renal tubule. Remember this. This is very important that 99% of the filtrate has to be reabsorbed by the renal tubule, and it could be either by passive or the active process. I told you. Okay, let me show you this table. This table is very, very important. First, in proximal convoluted tubule, 70 to 80% of the electrolytes are reabsorbed. Water is reabsorbed. Bicarbonate ions are reabsorbed by the PCT, and also the glucose and amino acid are also reabsorbed in PCT. That is why we call that essential reabsorption takes place in PCT. Second is the descending limb of loop of Henle, because it is moving downward. That is why we call it as descending. Descending limb of loop of Henle. Here the reabsorption of water takes place only. Only water. Remember this, very important. Only water. Because the membrane is impermeable for salt. Okay, so only water reabsorption takes place in descending limb of loop of Henle. Very important. Next is the ascending limb of loop of Henle. It has two parts, thick and thin. Okay, in the ascending limb of loop of Henle, only salt reabsorption occur. No water reabsorption. Okay, water reabsorption occur only in the descending limb, and in the ascending limb only salt reabsorption. Remember this. And the thick part of the ascending limb, there's active reabsorption of NaCl, and in thin part the reabsorption is passive. Now comes the distal convoluted tubule. Here the reconditional, I told you, conditional reabsorption takes place of sodium and water and bicarbonate ion. Sodium in the presence of aldosterone hormone, which is a mineral corticoid, and water in the presence of ADH, which is an antidiuretic hormone, or also called as vasopressin. Okay, this vasopressin is synthesized by hypothalamus gland, but stored in the posterior part of the pituitary. Okay, when the signal from the hypothalamus is given to the posterior pituitary, posterior pituitary will release this ADH hormone to prevent the excess loss of water from the body. Collecting duct, water reabsorption, and in the collecting duct also the reabsorption is conditional. So water reabsorption takes place, and the small amount of urea, very important. Remember that the small amount of urea is reabsorbed in collecting duct. And there's a tubular secretion also. Tubular secretion is to maintain the ionic balance and the acid-base balance of the body. In PCT, the tubular secretion of H plus and the ammonia, okay, they will move into the PCT, and they help in maintaining the pH of blood. Remember one more point, that tubular secretion takes place at PCT, at DCT, and collecting duct. There's a three places where the tubular secretion is taking place: PCT, DCT, and the collecting duct. In DCT also tubular secretion of H plus, ammonia, and K plus. So they play a very important role in maintaining the balance of the blood. Along with that, they also maintain the ionic balance. Collecting duct, they also play an important role in maintaining the pH of the blood and the ionic balance. It's very important. Please remember this table. You can see in this figure the descending limb of loop of Henle. From this part, only the water is reabsorbed, only water. And from the ascending limb of loop of Henle, only NaCl is reabsorbed. Please remember this. It's very important. And here you can see in PCT, there's secretion of H plus, ammonia. In DCT, secretion of K plus and H plus. And the reabsorption of NaCl salt, reabsorption of water, reabsorption of bicarbonate ions. Counter current, very, very important. We know that mammals, they have the ability to produce a concentrated urine, and two important part that play a very important role in this is the loop of Henle and vasa recta. Okay, and counter current develops when the fluid of different osmolarity are moving in opposite direction. In this, there's a one fluid in this, second fluid is in, and they're having the different osmolarity and they're moving in opposite direction. This result to counter current. And counter current, they generally develop between the two limbs of the vasa recta, two limbs of the loop of Henle, and also between the limbs of vasa recta and the limbs of loop of Henle, because they're present in close proximity. This is the vasa recta. And this is the loop of Henle. Because vasa recta is a U-shaped network of blood vessels around the loop of Henle. Now see, afferent atriole, it will carry the blood. Blood will reach to this glomerular capillaries. From this, the glomerular filtrate will first enter into the Bowman capsule. Then it will enter into the PCT. The glomerular filtrate, which is having an osmolarity of 300. So the initial osmolarity of the filtrate is 300. Remember this. Now when this filtrate reaches to the descending, this is the descending loop of Henle. When it reaches to descending limb of loop of Henle, what will happen in the descending limb? The water reabsorption takes place. So all the water will be moved out of the filtrate, right? It will be reabsorbed by this descending limb of loop of Henle. Then what will happen? If the water will be reabsorbed, only the salt concentration will increase in the filtrate, right? If the salt concentration increases, it will lead to high osmolarity. That is why initially it is 300. Now it has increased to 400, then 600, 800, 1000, and ultimately reaches to 1200. Osmolarity is increasing because the water is reabsorbed. Solute concentration increases. Okay. Now this high osmolarity filtrate reaching to the ascending limb of loop of Henle. Okay, when it reaches to the ascending limb of loop of Henle, what will happen now in ascending limb of loop of Henle? Salt are reabsorbed. Remember, salt are reabsorbed. Now all the NaCl will be reabsorbed. Okay, all the NaCl will reabsorb. NaCl is a solute. If I reabsorbed all the solute, then what will happen? Now all the solute will reabsorb. So osmolarity will decrease. So osmolarity, earlier it was 200, 1200. Now it has reached to 900, then 600, 400, 300, and finally to 200. Osmolarity start decreasing because the NaCl, they are reabsorbed by the ascending limb of loop of Henle. Okay. So the filtrate which is reaching the DCT is having osmolarity of 200, which is less than the initial. Initial it was 300. Now it is 200. Okay. Then one more point. Now the ascending limb of the vasa recta. Ascending limb of the vasa recta, take this NaCl which is absorbed by this ascending limb of the, sorry, but this is descending limb. Okay, this is the descending limb. Okay, this is the descending limb of the vasa recta. So descending limb of the vasa recta will take the NaCl from the ascending limb of loop of Henle, and you can see the osmolarity start increases because it start absorbing the solute, which is NaCl. So osmolarity reaches to 1200. At this point, this is the ascending limb of vasa recta. Now this ascending limb will start giving this NaCl back to medulla of the kidney. So Now the solute concentration has decreases because now the NaCl has been reabsorbed and they're given back to the medulla. So solute concentration decreases, so osmolarity start decreasing from 800 to 600, then 400, reaches to ultimately initial, which is 300. So, and remember, there's one more point, that is urea. Small amount of urea is also absorbed by this ascending limb of loop of Henle, then it will carry and finally reaches to this collecting duct, and the collecting duct will again give back the urea to the medulla. So urea and NaCl, they play a very important role in maintaining the high osmolarity of medulla. Very important. NaCl plus urea, they maintain the high osmolarity of medulla, which is a part of kidney. Remember this. Now let's come to the regulation of kidney. First step is the renin-angiotensin mechanism, or the vasoconstrictor. Vasoconstrictor is which reduces the lumen of the vessels, or narrowing the lumen of the vessels. So when the BP drops, blood pressure drops, blood volume decreases. In that case, the juxtaglomerular cells, they release a hormone which is renin, and the liver, they release angiotensinogen. Now this renin will act on angiotensinogen, and in angiotensinogen will be converted to angiotensin 1. Now this angiotensin converting enzyme will be released by lungs. This will convert angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2. Now this angiotensin 2 will function. First, it will activate the thirst center of the hypothalamus. So when you feel thirst, you will start drinking water, right? And water play a very important role in maintaining the blood volume. Remember this. So earlier the blood volume was low. After drinking water, the blood volume will increase. If the blood volume increase, it will increase the blood pressure. Second, the angiotensin, they worked as a vasoconstrictor. So they will contract the lumen of the vessels and elevate the blood pressure. Second, the angiotensin 2, they also act on the adrenal cortex, and they stimulate the synthesis of aldosterone, which is a mineral corticoid, and this aldosterone, they leads to the conditional reabsorption of salt and water. So when the water gets reabsorbed, the blood volume will increase, which will already leads to elevated blood pressure. Okay. Now let's come to the second regulation, which is by hypothalamus. During the diuresis condition, diuresis means the excess loss of water from the body. So the osmoreceptor of hypothalamus, they get activated. When they get activated, they signal the posterior pituitary to secrete a hormone which is vasopressin, or also known as ADH, which is antidiuretic hormone. The vasopressin, they perform two functions. Number one is the vasoconstrictor. So they will narrow the lumen of the blood vessels, increase the blood pressure. Second, they will act as a antidiuretic hormone. They will increase the reabsorption of the water. When they increase the reabsorption of the water, the blood volume will increase, and increased in blood volume will reach to increase in blood pressure. Okay. Now, both the regulation, they are leading to increase in volume, which leads to increase in blood pressure. Now we have to regulate this blood pressure. So there's another hormone which is released, which is the atrial natriuretic hormone. This hormone is released by the walls of the heart cell. So the wall of heart releases this atrial natriuretic factor, which is a vasodilator. Dilator means relax. So they will relax the vessels or increase the lumen of the blood vessels. So they will act as a vasodilation and decrease the blood pressure. or they help in lowering the blood pressure. And they also stop this renin-angiotensin mechanism. Okay? I hope it is clear. Moving next is the micturition, which is the process of excreting urine from the urinary bladder. And it is a voluntary control. That means it is controlled by the CNS or the brain. First is the filling of the urinary bladder. When the urinary bladder gets filled with urine, the urinary bladder stretch and it will activate the stretch receptor. The stretch receptor will send the impulse to the brain. From the brain, there's a motor impulse will be carried, and these motor impulse will act on the internal and external sphincter. They will relax the sphincter and the contraction of the urinary bladder takes place and urine will come out of the body. This is what we call micturition. In parasympathetic, which is a relaxed, when the body is in the relaxed state, promote urination by the urinary bladder contraction. In sympathetic, it inhibits urination by inhibiting the urinary bladder contraction. Moving next is the role of other organ in excretion, like lungs. A large amount of CO2 is removed. Sweat gland and sebaceous gland. Sweat gland will produce sweat, and sweat consists of NaCl, small amount of urea, lactic acid. Sebaceous gland produce sebum, and sebum is consist of hydrocarbons, sterol, waxes. So all these wastes are removed from the body in the form of sebum, sweat, carbon dioxide, and liver also produce bile, and bile contains bilirubin, biliverdin. These are toxic pigments. Bilirubin and biliverdin, they are toxic pigments. And the bile also contains cholesterol, degraded steroid hormone, vitamins and drugs. These are passed out through the digestive waste. Okay? Moving next is the disorder of the excretory organ. Number one is uremia. Uremia, when the excess of blood, urea is present in the blood. And this happens when the kidney is not functioning properly. So the urea gets accumulated in the blood, which leads to uremia condition. Second is hemodialysis. Dialysis we generally refer as an artificial kidney. Okay? So in this process, the removal of urea is done. First, this is the blood. The blood will drain the blood from the artery to pump. From this will move. This is the artificial kidney. Okay. This is consist of cellophane tubes, and these cellophane tubes, they are highly porous. So the blood this blood is carrying a high amount of urea. When this blood passes through this cellophane tube, the urea will be diffused out passively in the dialysis fluid. Okay. And the blood which is coming out from this is having a very low amount of urea, because maximum urea has been reached to the dialysis fluid, which is collected in this bottle. This is what we call hemodialysis. Is the removal of the excess urea from the blood. Next is the renal calci. Calci is the stones of calcium oxalate. The stone of calcium oxalate, and these are the stones or the insoluble mass of crystallized salt formed within the kidney, which we call it as kidney stones. And glomerulonephritis is the inflammation of glomeruli. The kidney transplantation is a method in correction of renal failure. Moving next is the question. Question number 1 says, match the following parts of a nephron with their function. Option 1 is the descending limb of Henle loop. Let's mark it as column 1 and column 2. Okay, so the column 1 has descending limb of Henle loop, proximal convoluted tubule, descending limb of Henle loop, and distal convoluted tubule. Now column 2 has reabsorption of salt only, reabsorption of water only, conditional reabsorption of sodium ions and water, and reabsorption of water, ions, and organic nutrients. Now you have to match column 1 with column 2. What do you think? What will be the correct option for this question? Everybody in the chat box, quickly answer. Okay. First is the descending limb of loop of Henle. Let me draw it. This is the Bowman capsule, PCT. This is a loop of Henle. Okay. This part is moving downward. We call it as descending loop of Henle. This part is moving upward. We call it as ascending loop of Henle. Right? Now question is saying that descending limb of loop of Henle. In descending limb, I told you only water reabsorption takes place, only water. The walls of descending limb of loop of Henle, they're impermeable to salt. Okay, so only water will reabsorb from the descending limb of loop of Henle. So A, reabsorption of water only. So A will be 2. Okay, moving next is the proximal convoluted tubule. I told you that in PCT, maximum reabsorption takes place, right? Glucose, amino acid, electrolytes, water, carbonate. Maximum reabsorption takes place in PCT. We also call it as essential reabsorption. So reabsorption of water, ions, and organic nutrients like glucose and amino acids. So B would be 4th. C says ascending limb of Henle loop. Ascending, only salt reabsorption like NaCl, only salt. Water will not be reabsorbed from the ascending limb of loop of Henle. C would be first. Distal convoluted tubule, DCT. DCT shows conditional reabsorption of sodium ions and water. And collecting duct also shows the conditional reabsorption of water. Remember this. So D would be 3. Now match. A second, B 4th, C 1, and D 3. So correct option is 2. I hope it is clear now. Chijuni, I hope it is clear to you, beta. Now moving next. Question number 2 says, match the items given in column 1 with those in column 2 and select the correct option given below. Okay. Now column 1 says glycosuria, B says got, C is vena calcei, D is glomerulonephritis. Column 2 says accumulation of uric acid in joints, mass of crystallized salts within the kidney, inflammation in glomeruli, and presence of glucose in urine. You have to match the column A with column 2. Column 1 with column 2. What do you think? What will be the correct option for this question? Glycosuri, as the name suggests, glyco means glucose, right? So this refers as a presence of glucose in urine. Remember this. Now, God, I already told you that when you are consuming a high diet which contains, when you are consuming a diet which contain a high amount of purines, then purine will be converted to xanthin. Xanthin will be converted to uric acid crystals. And these uric acid crystals, they get accumulated in the joint and leads to gouty arthritis, or we also call it as gout. So A is fourth, which shows the presence of glucose in urine. B, gout, which is the accumulation of uric acid in joint. For B1. Renal calcium is a very easy. Calcium means crystals of calcium oxalate. So the mass of crystallized salt within the kidney, that means which is the kidney stone. So C is second. D, glomerulonephritis, the inflammation of glomeruli. So D is 3. A fourth, B 1, C second, and D 3. So correct option is 4. I hope it is clear to everyone. Now moving next. Figure shows human urinary system with the structure labeled as A to D. Select the option which correctly identifies them and give their characteristics and or function. So this is a human excretory system. First, show D that D is cortex, outer part of the kidney, and do not contain any part of nephron. Option 2 says A is the adrenal gland located at the anterior part of kidney and excrete catecholamines which stimulate glycogen breakdown. B is pelvis, which is a broad funnel-shaped space inner to the hilum directly connected to the loops of Henle. C is the medulla, the inner zone of kidney, and contain a complete nephron. What do you think? What will be the correct option for this question? See, beta, they are saying that D is cortex. Yes, it is cortex. Outer part of kidney. Yes, it is the outer part of it. Do not contain any part of the nephron. That is wrong. Because nephron, I told you it consists of two parts. One is glomerulus, and the second one is renal tubule. Okay, renal tubule is composed of Bowman capsule, PCT, DCT, and loop of Henle, right? So glomerulus, Bowman capsule, PCT, DCT, they all are present in cortex. They are the part of the nephron. They are present in the cortex of kidney. Loop of Henle is present in medulla of kidney. And the collecting duct extends from the cortex to the deep medulla. So it says that do not contain any part of the nephron. No, it contains like glomerulus, Bowman capsule, PCT, DCT. They are present in the cortex of kidney. So first is wrong. Second says the adrenal gland, which is located at the anterior part of the kidney. Yes, if this is a kidney, here is the adrenal gland. It is present at the anterior part of the kidney. Secrete catecholamines. Yes, adrenal gland secrete catecholamines, which are secreted by the medulla of the adrenal gland, which are epinephrine or norepinephrine. We also call it as adrenaline or non-adrenaline, and which stimulate glycogen breakdown. Yes, they stimulate glycogen breakdown. So this is the correct option. We can see that A is the adrenal gland. B is pelvis. Yes, this is a funnel shaped space which is known as pelvis. Yes, B is pelvis. Broad funnel shaped space inner to the hilum. Yes, Directly connected to the loop of Henle? No, it is not directly connected to the loop of Henle. These fourth option 4 says C is medulla. Yes, C is medulla. The inner zone of kidney. Yes, it is the inner zone of kidney. Contain complete nephron. I told you that some part of the nephron is present in cortex and some, which is the loop of Henle, is present in medulla. But it says that contains the complete nephron. So it is wrong. So correct option is option number 2. I hope it is clear to everyone. Now moving next. The increase in osmolarity from the outer to the inner medullary interstitium is maintained due to. First, it is given that is a close proximity between the Henle loop and the vasa recta, counter current mechanism, selective secretion of carbonate and hydrogen ions in PCT, higher blood pressure in glomerular capillaries. They are asking the increase in osmolarity from the outer to inner of the medullary meristitium is maintained due to. Remember, try to recall the counter current. Very good, Chichni. Very good. First says close proximity between the Henle loop and the vasa recta. Yes. Remember, the NaCl and urea, they play a very important role in maintaining the high osmolarity in the medulla. Counter current mechanism, yes. Selective secretion of bicarbonate and hydrogen and PCT. where secretion नहीं होता, bicarbonate का absorption होता है. Okay, secretion of H plus will take place and ammonia in PCT. High blood pressure in glomerular capillary. This does not relate to the osmolarity. So the main point which are related to, which lead to the increase in osmolarity from outer to inner medullary interstitium is the close proximity between Henle loop and vasa recta and counter current mechanism. It is first and second. So it is option number 4th, which is 1 and 2. I hope it is clear. Now moving next, select the correct statement. Atrionatriuretic factor increases the blood pressure. Angiotensin II is a powerful vasodilator. Third, counter current pattern of blood flow is not observed in vasa recta. Reduction in glomerular filtration rate activates the GC cell to release renin. You have to find the correct statement. What do you think? What will be the correct option for this question? First is the atrionatriuretic factor increases the blood pressure. No, this acts as a vasodilator. Remember, it acts as a vasodilator and it released by the walls of the heart. So it decreases the blood pressure or lowers the blood pressure. So first is wrong. Angiotensin II is a powerful vasodilator. No, it is a vasoconstrictor. It will narrow the lumen of the vessel and increase the blood pressure. Third says counter current pattern of blood flow is not observed in vasa recta. No, beta, it is observed. Next is reduction in glomerular filtration rate. Activate the digester glomerular cells to release renin. Yes, this is absolutely correct. Because when the blood volume decreases or the BP decreases, the glomerular filtration rate also decreases. Okay. And this low glomerular filtration rate will activate the juxtaglomerular cells and they release renin, and then renin will act on the angiotensinogen, which convert angiotensinogen to angiotensin 1, and then there will be an angiotensin converting enzyme which will convert it to angiotensin 2. Now this angiotensin 2 will work as a vasoconstrictor or activate the thirst center in hypothalamus, or also stimulate the adrenal cortex to secrete aldosterone. So all these will lead to increase in blood volume, which will increase the blood pressure and increase the glomerular filtration rate. Okay, this is what we have studied in the regulation of kidney. So that's all for today. Thank you for your participation. I hope this lecture was informative for you. Thank you all and see you in the next class. Have a nice day.